For 30 years, the world was sold a trillion-dollar lie. We were told that the M1 Abrams was an untouchable ghost, a jagged, absolute monster that nature itself refused to recognize. The Pentagon laughed at anyone who suggested a cheaper, smaller enemy could ever make this 70-ton beast bleed. They mocked the idea of low-tech warfare, until the mud of Eastern Europe shattered the myth. You are looking at a machine built for a war that no longer exists, a patchwork beast struggling to survive in the zero zone. Today, we aren't just looking at armor and engines. We are investigating the systematic execution of a legend. From the technological injustice of its design to the moment a $500 drone proved that even an immortal can be killed, we are deconstructing the hierarchy of steel and survival. Welcome to the end of an era. Welcome to your life as a ground force monster where even the king is no longer safe. The US Army calls it a masterpiece, but if you look closer, you see an engineering abomination that was forced to function through brute force mathematics. When the Abrams was first conceived, it was designed to insult the very air and ground it moved through. It was a high-stakes gamble, trade everything, fuel efficiency, weight, and simplicity for the single, terrifying promise of being untouchable. For decades, the Abrams lived in a state of God mode, it selecting targets with a cold mathematical indifference, pulling the trigger from miles away, while its enemies were still staring at blank horizons. This was the peak of technological injustice, but this invincibility grew into a dangerous complacency. The Pentagon's elite grew drunk on their own recruitment posters, believing they had built $1 billion glasshouse that could never be cracked. They laughed at the peasants with their RPGs and their old Soviet-era missiles. They believed that as long as you had 4 independent digital computers fighting every microsecond to stabilize your turret, you were a ghost that nature couldn't stop. But they forgot one thing. Every monster has a heartbeat, and every heartbeat can be found. The hopeless diamond of the desert was about to enter a new kind of war, one where its 70 tons of armor were no longer a shield, but a target. At rank 1, you aren't a warrior. You are the biological fuel for a machine that is slowly suffocating under its own weight. As the driver or the loader, you are the first to realize the trillion-dollar lie isn't about the armor, it's about the demon in the box. The Abrams relies on a massive gas turbine engine, an engineering abomination that riram quando foi proposta pela primeira vez. They called it a jet engine for a tractor, and they were right. This engine is the source of your God mode speed, but it's also your death sentence in the zero zone. It drinks fuel with a gluttony that nature refuses to recognize, requiring a tail of supply truck so long it makes the absolute monster look like a prisoner of its own logistics. If you are the driver, you are strapped just inches away from this roaring beast, feeling the heat that even 4 independent digital computers struggle to manage. The hopeless diamond of the desert was built for wide-open sands, but in the mud of a real, high-intensity conflict, rank 1 becomes a high-stakes gamble of endurance. The loaders are slamming 70-pound shells into the breach while the turbine screams, creating a toxic nightmare of heat and ozone. The experts mocked the complexity of this setup, saying it was a patchwork beast that would fail the moment the sand got wet. And then came the drones. At rank 1, you realize that your 70 tons of depleted uranium armor are useless if a $500 drone can find the massive heat signature of that demon in the box. The myth of the untouchable predator dies the moment you realize you're sitting in $1 billion glass house, and the enemy just found a rock. This is the reality of technological injustice. You have the most advanced engine on Earth, but it's the very thing that makes you the loudest, hottest, and most vulnerable target on the battlefield. Welcome to Rank 2. You are the system architect of destruction. From your seat, the world is a pixelated abyss of heat signatures and cold mathematics. You operate with a God mode indifference, believing that if you can see it, you can delete it. This is what the Pentagon promised, a machine so advanced that it turned war into a video game. They mocked the peasant tanks of the East, saying their optics were primitive and their range was a joke. But here is where the technological injustice turns against you. Your billion-dollar fire control system was built to hunt other tanks, monsters like yourself. It was designed to track massive steel targets moving across the horizon. But it wasn't built to see a piece of plastic and 4 rotors hovering silently above your turret. At rank 2, you realize that your absolute monster is actually wearing a billion-dollar blindfold. While you are looking miles ahead for a fight that never comes, the real threat is inches above your head. The experts laughed at the idea of toy drones being a threat to 70 tons of depleted uranium. They called it asymmetric nonsense, until those drones began diving into the thin armor of the engine deck, the one place your God mode optics can't reach. You pull the trigger, and a shell that costs more than a house leaves the barrel, traveling at Mach 5 to strike a target that doesn't exist. Meanwhile, a $500 drone, steered by a teenager in a trench with a cheap headset, finds the gap in your armor. At this moment, rank 2 is no longer about lethality. It's about the terrifying realization that your masterpiece of engineering is an evolutionary dead end. The hopeless diamond isn't just unstable, it's obsolete. The very complexity that made the Abrams a legend is now the weight that is dragging it into the grave. You have the most expensive sights in history, but you are still dying in the dark. At rank 3, you are the god of the machine, but your throne is made of melting iron. As the tank commander, you aren't just managing a crew, you are managing a $1 trillion lie that has finally run out of time. The Pentagon's elite, the same ones who mocked the patchwork beast in the 70s and then worshipped it in the 90s, are now forced to watch their absolute monster become a burning monument to complacency. The greatest enemy at rank 3 isn't a missile, it's the realization that you are commanding a dinosaur in an era of ghosts. Every time you open your hatch to scan for the threat that your digital optics missed, you are staring into the zero zone. You see the smoke of your own logistics tail, the heat of your gluttonous turbine, and you realize that the Abrams didn't lose because it was weak. It lost because it was too arrogant to change. The myth is dead. The invincible armor of the 20th century has been defeated by the digital desperation of the 21st. But in the world of ground force tech, death is just the first step of evolution. The Pentagon has finally stopped laughing. They are now working on the M1 a machine that strips away the weight of the past to create something the world has never seen. A ghost that nature refuses to recognize. They are removing the demon in the box, adding active shields that catch missiles like flies, and preparing for the zero-human era. They are trying to build a monster that doesn't bleed. But as the king of the old world, you have to ask yourself, was the Abrams a masterpiece that failed, or was it a necessary error to teach us how to survive the future? We traded our heroes for sensors and our steel for pixels. The Abrams myth is dead, but the impossible monster that comes next will make the world wish for the days when a tank could still be mocked. Is the era of the heavy tank over, or are we just seeing the birth of a more terrifying predator? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you Team Steel or Team Ghost? Smash that like button if you want to see the deep dive into the M1 and subscribe to Ground Force Tech. Out.